Hi everyone, my name is Gracie Williams and I will be presenting on West Nile fever. So the infectious agent and disease, it's referred to as West Nile fever or West Nile disease, and it's caused by West Nile virus. It's a positive single-stranded RNA, and it's in the family of Flavividae viruses and the genus of Flavivirus. So some background on it, and then also the prevalence of West Nile virus. It was identified in 1937 during a study of yellow fever. The person who they thought was infected with yellow fever came back and had different types of a viral infection, and after analyzing it, they realized it was a new virus. It was There wasn't any serious outbreaks until the mid 1990s, and the first one was in Romania, and it was pretty much confined to the Eastern Hemisphere until 1999 when it came to the United States, in from Europe to New York, and then um, it it had like a large outbreak in the US at that time that like was across Europe and everything else. And the outbreaks typically follow bird migration patterns, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that is later. This map over here is a preliminary map of the neurointensive disease incidence by state, from 2020. So you can see that like it's more prevalent in the Midwest where the migration patterns happen from birds. So how it's transmitted, the virus originates in birds, and then when mosquitoes suck the blood of birds, then the virus gets into the mosquitoes' salivary glands, and then when mosquitoes bite humans, they extract it, and it can also be transmitted to horses, but horses can't give it to humans, and humans can't give it to horses. Um, so the cycle for the virus goes from bird to mosquito to bird, and it just manifests that way. And then the humans, we get it from the mosquito though when they bite us. So it's a vector transmission, and it can be like we can be infected by like birds and things like that if we like come in contact with their uh, meat if it hasn't been fully cooked, or yeah, if you like touch a dead bird or something like that and it was infected. And then people can also it can be transmitted from person to person through an organ transplant, blood infusions, or even breast milk. There's only been on WHO's website, they said there was only one known case of it transmitting from mother to child during birth. So that really isn't prevalent. It's mainly just the blood infusions, breast milk, and the organ transplants, which they should be screening for viruses anyway. So the signs and symptoms, if you just have West Nile fever, the signs are going to be like flu-like symptoms. So fever, headache, tiredness, body aches, nausea, vomiting, swollen lymph nodes, and occasionally a rash will appear on the trunk of your body. The symptoms typically go away within a couple weeks, but the tiredness can last for up to 3 weeks to a month. And so the incubation period is 3 to 14 days. It typically doesn't last longer than 8 days, but it's seen to last in some individuals in 14. So that's what the WHO recommends to say, is that the incubation period is 3 to 14 days. 80% of cases are asymptomatic, so a large portion of people aren't even going to know that they have the virus, and since you can't really contract it from person to person, it's not necessarily a bad thing that it's asymptomatic in 80% of the population, because that means that they don't suffer the effects of the disease, and they're not typically spreading it to other people even when they're asymptomatic. So about 150 people will develop a severe neuroinvasive disease, which could be West Nile encephalitis, meningitis, or West Nile poliomyelitis. And those are more serious diseases where you could be hospitalized and you'll have to get treatment for like to be able to breathe and things like that in some cases. Um, but those, again, are not really typical 1 in 150 people. But the populations who are going to be more affected by those neuroinvasive diseases are going to be populations in the category of 50 years or older, and those who are already high risk because they're immunocompromised from some other type of disease. And the CDC said, like, especially those who are immunocompromised from an organ transplant could develop a neuroinvasive disease from the West Nile virus. So the diagnostic testing, there's not a way to just look at someone and diagnose West Nile virus because the symptoms are really kind of the same as a lot of other things like flu and things like that. So you have to get actually like tested for it and you have to have blood drawn. And the one of the more prevalent things they're going to be looking for is your IgM antibody count. So that's detectable within 3 to 8 days of illness. But the antibodies can persist in your body for up to a year, and it has been like theorized that they could last longer. So with the IgM antibody testing, it's more accurate than the IgG, which I'll talk about in a second. But it also can just be a sign that you had West Nile virus at some point within the last year, but you don't necessarily have it right now, so it is kind of hard to diagnose. The IgG antibody testing, those antibodies become detectable shortly after IgM antibodies, and they can persist in the body for several years. So, again, like it's hard to say, oh yeah, you have it right now because the antibodies can last in your body for a long time. Then there's the viral cultures to detect viral RNA. I wasn't able to find much on this about how they actually get the viral cultures, but that's another way that they can detect the West Nile virus in your system. And then for the severe neuroinvasive diseases, they will require a spinal tap or more blood work to confirm the infection of West Nile virus. So, yeah, that sounds painful. Okay, so the treatment and prevention. There's no cure for West Nile fever or any of the neuroinvasive diseases that West Nile virus may cause. So basically, for West Nile fever, the symptoms kind of just go away on their own within 2 weeks. And unless you develop one of these neuroinvasive diseases, they don't really do anything other than like just the typical, go home, rest, things like that. But for the neuroinvasive diseases, they will treat the symptoms and try and ease the pain of the people who have been infected with the virus. So, like I said earlier, like you could be hospitalized. You might have to be on some sort of respiratory help. Some of the diseases that it can develop can like swell your lymph nodes and close off your lungs and things like that. So you might be like on a respirator and things like that. For the prevention, there's no vaccine. The CDC recommends community level mosquito control programs. So, kind of what those would look like, I guess, would be just like community awareness was a lot of what I saw, and just people like being aware, especially during the summer months, that they need to take personal measures to prevent exposure to mosquitoes, which would include like wearing long sleeve shirts and pants, using repellent, and having limited time outdoors from dusk to dawn, which is kind of hard to wear long sleeves in Texas during the summer, but yeah. And then there are my sources. Thank you for watching. See y'all tomorrow.